This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga Birth Babies, and today we are going to talk about adoption. I have Rebecca Mendel. She is a partner in a New York City firm, Rosen, Steinhagen, and Mendel, and she's an adoptive parent herself, as well as having her specialty in law under adoption and assisted reproduction. Rebecca is also a founding member of the New York Attorneys of Adoption and Family Formation and serves as its vice president. And the conversation that we have, Rebecca really comes at this from two perspectives. She's gone through the process, the emotional side, as well as she supports people on the legal side. So she has some really interesting insight. I hope you enjoy this. And it's for those that maybe you're considering adoption. Maybe you've been through this. Maybe you're just the friend of someone going through this process and you want to have a more understanding, empathetic lens in which you can speak to them from. So I think you'll enjoy this. Before we get to that conversation, thank you for those that have been leaving ratings and reviews. We've had a bunch come up. It helps people find the podcast and get this information. One of our graduates from our teacher training program, Hetty, wrote something in. I'm just going to read a snippet of it. She said, I attended Deb's prenatal teacher training in New York City while pregnant in 2018. Since then, I've listened to every episode of Yoga Birth Babies. It has not only provided with the information which led to my informed birth choices, but the podcast continues to educate me in the birth world and relevant items for raising my now 14th month-old son. Thank you, Hetty, for that. I appreciate your time and effort in leaving that. Thank you so much. And then just a few little things. I've had people reach out saying they're enjoying the podcast, but they want to get more out of what we offer at the studio. And some people can't make it to New York, so I'm bringing the studio to you. We're starting to do more online offerings. We have 2 upcoming workshops that you can watch via Zoom. So we're going to live stream it and you can ask your questions and be a part of the workshop. And then I also have a 4-class prenatal package on the website. There are 4 one-hour prenatal yoga classes with all different focuses, so it's not the same one over and over. And you can check that out so you can still be part of our community outside the walls of the Upper West Side studio. And then last little thing, teacher training. We're starting to wrap up our enrollment for this first part of the year. New York City only has a couple spots left, and then we'll be in Richmond, Virginia in the late spring. And then we're actually going to do some stuff in the summer, but not our prenatal teacher training. So lots of great stuff. You can keep in touch with what's going on with our newsletter. You can check it out at prenatalyogacenter.com. All right, I think I talked enough. Let's take a super quick break, and we come back. Please enjoy my conversation with Rebecca.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Calendar. Let's be real. Running a household can be exhausting and chaotic. And finding the perfect Mother's Day gift, it's not exactly a no-brainer. Until now. The Skylight Calendar is the best way to organize the family and give everyone, especially mom, some peace of mind to enjoy the things that matter most. The Skylight Calendar is a smart, touchscreen calendar that keeps track of and manages the chores, dinner planning, groceries, and to-dos for the whole family. The Skylight Calendar automatically syncs each family member's digital calendars and displays them all together on one color-coded touchscreen. It even doubles as a digital picture frame, so you can finally share all those special moments that are just sitting on your phone. As a limited-time offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight calendar when you go to skylightcal.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightcal.com/easy.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so great. And I'm so appreciative that you're spending a little bit of time. I know I'm pulling you out of a really busy workday, and it's just so exciting to talk about a topic, adoption and assisting reproduction, that we haven't talked about before. So this is really exciting. So our talk came because one of my friends is an adoptive parent, and she just says that oftentimes she doesn't feel well represented in the parenthood world. So I thought, wow, this is a topic I haven't talked about, and it's important. So thank you for spending a little bit of time. And I know not only are you an adoptive parent, but you're also an adoption assisted reproduction attorney. So yay for me getting so much information. So I think we're going to try to cover a little bit of everything.
Great. Well, thank you for having me for both purposes.
Absolutely. So I know adoption is so varied, and there's so many reasons one adopts a child. So I know we're going to talk about your personal experience, and that may not reflect that of all adoptive parents. I just want to put that out there for everyone out there. So I guess before we jump into adoption, I would love to hear a little bit about you and how you ended up focusing on adoption law.
Sure. So, my story is somewhat different from other adoption attorneys. Many adoption attorneys became adoption attorneys after they had gone through adoption on some level by themselves or were somehow affected by adoption. My story is that I always knew I wanted to work with families and children. I'm just more of a people person, and I knew when I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to do something to help children and families. So I interned at various places and did different things while I was even in law school to try to have a focus in this area. And I actually found my current law firm that does a lot of foster care and adoption work and family building and family law issues. And I just started working there, and I'm one of the rare people has been at the same place for over 20 years, but I absolutely love what I do. So when I started working here, I just fell in love with the area of the work. At the time, I was married, and my husband and I struggled with unexplained infertility, which, of course, is a huge percentage of fertility issues, or this unexplained category. We went through years of various infertility treatments and trying to figure things out. And at the end of the day, we decided what was most important to us is that we just wanted to be parents, and biology wasn't the most important thing to us. It was just being parents was the most important. What I did for a living was, we knew, since I was an adoption attorney, I knew at some point I would like to have a child through adoption. I just didn't know if it was going to be my first child or another child. But we ultimately, after all the infertility, decided let's go that route. We had decided not to use assisted reproduction with donor gametes for our personal reasons, but we decided to just go the adoption route. It was, at the time, people always ask me, was it easier for you since this is what you do? Is it this? Is it that? Since I knew so much. Knowing a lot could also be an impediment because you know so much in the area. But it was a journey for me, just like everybody else. I had to turn my lawyer brain on and just be a prospective adoptive parent and feel all the emotions and go through the stress and go through learning information and asking the questions of my attorney, things like that everybody else would have to do. So it was a process that I happened to feel like that I was became an adoption attorney, maybe for the reason because I love what I do personally and professionally, but I became an adoption attorney first and an adoptive parent after.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that answer. I thought it inspired you to go into that part, which, I talk to so many people in the childbirth world, and it's usually like something happened in their birth and that became their inspiration. But that's exciting. And I personally, I went through the same thing, not for adoption, but I was already teaching. I hadn't had a child when I started teaching prenatal yoga. So when I became pregnant, it was I had to like turn off my teacher brain. When I was teaching childbirth education as a doula, I had to be like, this is not about the education, this is about the doing. So I guess you and I have that similar perspective. So do you mind sharing a bit of your story about becoming an adoptive parent? And if it's too personal, I recognize that also.
So in terms of we had decided to, so part of becoming an adoptive parent is that you have to be qualified to be an adoptive parent and have a home study and child abuse clearances and criminal clearances and letters of reference and making a profile book about who you are. And we did everything that my clients do and that every adoptive parent does. And we put ourselves out there and we were contacted. At first, we had a situation we were contacted about that it didn't work out. So I also have been through situations that do not work out. And then we learned about our daughter. Actually, we were at our friend's wedding when we got the call about her, and we learned about her on that day. And at their wedding, every year on their anniversary, it's something that we have in common, that's when we learned about our daughter, and that was their anniversary. So it's something very special. But we learned about her, and we immediately we learned that the birth mother had selected us, but we were not able to jump on a plane right away. There were certain legalities that had to happen with her situation, but we ran to Bye Bye Baby, started filling up our cart with supplies that we thought we needed. And, we were just like chickens with our heads cut off, running around, just trying to get everything in order. And ultimately, for us, we had a certain amount of time that we had to wait. And then we were able to get on a plane and go have her placed in our arms. And for us, one of the things that happened on a totally personal level is that we, for years of infertility, both of my husband and I had grandfathers named Sam, and we had decided our first child was going to be Sam or Samantha. And after all the struggles and all the situations that didn't work out for us, we knew we wanted a name. And we decided in the moment that we didn't want that name anymore because there was so much history behind that. We still decided on an S name, but we really wanted to have a fresh start for everything. And it was right before our daughter was placed in our arms, we hadn't even made the final decision. And it was right when she was placed in our arms that we looked at each other and said, this is her name. And we made our decision in the moment. And it was so beautiful just to, just have all these feelings with just closure on so many levels, and the start of a new life was really profound in the moment. And with any family, if a child is born in another state, we had to stay in that state for a certain amount of time before heading back home to New York. And we had to go through supervision where a social worker had to come to our home and make sure everything was going just fine. And then ultimately the adoption was finalized.
Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess something I hadn't really thought about was the time period. So and I'm sure it's going to vary. How much time is, or maybe there's no answer. You were called at your friend's wedding, then there was this small waiting period. Does it vary a lot, or is it pretty common? Could somebody be called that day and be like, okay, you have to be here tomorrow, or it's going to happen in a couple of weeks? Is there an average? Maybe there's no answer to that.
There is. It varies. You're right. It varies. Sometimes it could be that same day, that same moment. It depends on the circumstances of any situation. Some states do have some mandatory waiting periods, and sometimes the birth parent might want some time alone with the baby before the adoptive parents come. There's a very personal decisions that happen. Sometimes some legal stuff has to happen. Sometimes the birth mother, if she's working with an agency, might decide to place the child in an interim care before making her final decision about whether placing her child for adoption. So it's going to vary on every case, but there are certainly matters where the baby is placed, the baby is never placed immediately legally, like paperwork signed the second she gives birth, because there's a time period where the birth parent has to, recover and have just make sure that she's knowingly and voluntarily making the decision and consenting to the adoption. Some states put restrictions on that amount of time. Other states that don't, by a matter of, best practices, it's usually about at least 48 hours after birth, but sometimes it's more. Occasionally, it can be less depending on the circumstances, but it will greatly vary.
And then, how do you transition? Because again, if it's not that long, how do you mentally prepare for this transition of, maybe you have a few days, maybe a week? It's a massive, even though you wanted this, you moved steps to get this. It's a massive mental transition. How did you prepare? How do you advise your clients to prepare for this, for bringing a baby into your life?
It's funny because I think that many adoptive parents would sort of say they've been preparing for years, right? Like they have been preparing. They might not have gone through the pregnancy and gone through, the 9 months of preparing, but they may have been going through years and years and years of preparing. So this preparation is a bit different because you've been waiting for so long for this moment that it is, it's really, it can feel like a whirlwind, but in the best possible way. Representing people have been nervous, questioning whether, I've never had a baby. How do I put the car seat in my car? How to do this? It all works out. The nurses at the hospital, if it's a direct placement from the hospital, are so wonderful and try to help as much as possible, usually. People do just what every other family does, but they've been going through trainings, through their home study to learn about placements, and they've been thinking about parenting for quite a while, and that's probably what they think about the majority of the time while they're waiting, is preparing for that moment. Yes. And then in disbelief that it's actually here more than anything.
Yeah, I guess it's the waiting. It's here's some wait, prepare, then wait. Like you've been preparing, exactly. You're preparing, then you wait, and then all of a sudden, boom, here it is. Like hurry, stop. Yeah. Oh, that's wow. I guess I hadn't really wrapped my mind around literally like a week later where you'd been preparing, but then the reality of and now we have a baby at home. So let's talk about the bonding. Can you, if you don't mind sharing what that was like? Because you're all of a sudden you're with this brand new person and you're just meeting each other. I guess that happens too with a birth parent too.
Correct. It's really the second the baby is placed in your arms, it's just meant to be. And it's, no different than, like you said, someone who gives birth to a child, they're meeting for the first time as well. Maybe they've felt different things in terms of talking, to the belly or something like that. But, this child has, a lot of us say, you've been in my heart for so long, and you might not be in my, belly, but you're in my heart forever. So it's, it's definitely the bonding for us. I remember the feel of the second she was placed in my arms that she was meant to be there. It was, for me, it was not at all a struggle of bonding. It was, finally this attachment that was supposed to be there is there. This feeling that I've been craving is now finally there. It was a closure and, an excitement. So the bonding piece was not, it wasn't problematic for me. I think that sometimes some adoptive parents, there's a hesitancy if there's a time period that the birth parent has to change their mind. There is this weird feeling of bonding, but also protecting yourself in case the birth parent does change her mind and ask for the child to be returned to her. So there is some time that it's definitely an anxious time period for some, adoptive parents. So that might impact a little bit of the bonding, but I think that more often than not, the bonding happens, but people are just protecting their emotions as much as they can. But it's really hard when a baby's in your arms.
I can imagine. And that kind of brings up two very, very different questions. First, if you're doing this in the hospital, do they encourage skin to skin with the new baby?
Sometimes encourage is a difficult word. Not every hospital is very adoption friendly. You're talking about hospitals all over the United States. So I'm not just talking about New York, obviously, everywhere. And so some hospitals are wonderful and have the capacity and the space to give adoptive parents their own room for bonding, for everything. And others say you can come during visiting hours. And so it becomes there, and others have, social workers coming into the room all the time, so there's different levels of the behavior of hospitals. So encouraging, I don't know if it's necessarily a good word to use when it comes to just the hospital encourage, because the hospitals tend to try to stay out of adoptions. They sort of will, best case scenario, turn their head the other way. So then it really becomes, if you're in the same room as the birth parent, what feels appropriate in the moment and what doesn't. If you're in your own room, then, those are the things that, the adoptive parent or parents will make decisions about what they, want to do with regard to that.
Okay. And then totally different, my brain was like firing off in all different places. I wrote down, you talked about, and I hadn't even thought about this, that there is a time period that the birth parent could change their mind.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? Gosh, I couldn't even imagine the anxiety around this whole situation during that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go into my lawyer mode for a second. So,
lawyer hat.
my lawyer voice. So adoption is a creature of state law. So what that means is that there's not a uniform, every state will comply with the same standards when it comes to adoption. So every state will have their own laws about, when a birth parent consents to the adoption, how much time she has to change her mind. So in some states, it may be a long period of time. In some states, it may be irrevocable the second she signs the consent to adoption. So that time period is going to vary pursuant to different state laws. and the adoption itself will be governed by the law of the case, as we like to say. So if everybody is in New York, this will be done under New York law. If the birth parent is in a different state and the adoptive parent is in New York, well, then we're going to make a choice of law analysis and talk about what are the differences between the laws. The first step in every case is, can the adoptive parent even adopt in the other state where the birth parent is? Do we have the option of that state laws? In some states, the answer is no. They don't let out-of-state residents adopt there. And the birth parent can still place with the New York family. She just has to say that she's waiving her rights under the state that she resides in and is submitting to the laws, in this case, of New York. And then she'll sign all the necessary New York adoption paperwork. So then we'll all know going in what the laws are and how much time she has to change her mind under New York law. So the adoptive parents are going to know what that time period, the birth parents are going to know that time period. Sometimes some states, it's an automatic right to have the child returned to her care. Other states, it's a best interest analysis where everybody is on equal footing. So it really is, as a lawyerly response, it will depend. It's going to very much depend on many circumstances in any given case. So it could be as short as irrevocable. It could be as long as, say, 45 days to change their mind. So, and yes, there is such an anxiety level when you hear that and you haven't lived that. But a lot of people in New York who've adopted, or other states who've adopted with these long periods, have lived it. And as I tell my clients all the time, yes, it's a really anxiety. There's no hiding that this is not a fun time frame, but the good news is the baby's going to be up all the time. You're not going to know day from night, and you're going to be exhausted, that the time will hopefully fly by and it will be a blur.
Yeah, I know it's good advice for them, because I could imagine like standing by a calendar and just like checking off the days. But right, if you're so in the middle of this whole newborn, hopefully your mind's not sitting on there too much. So shifting back to your personal experience, what are some strategies or ways you responded to outsiders about their thoughts about adoption, family, friends? I'm sure people had some comments, or maybe they didn't. Maybe I'm wrong.
No. It's funny because everybody, I always take every moment, and yes, this is what I do for a living. So this is where it's hard to separate, because I feel like I educate every day, and I educate people on, adoption and different ways families are built, whether it be through donor egg, donor sperm, donor, gametes, or adoption, or, any which way, is that, families come in all shapes and sizes, and they come in different ways. And there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. So what I did in terms of preparing, first our family, is we talked openly about it. As I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned that you create a profile book about yourself. I had my family read my book. I had them be my proofreaders, and they give such support just by reading the book. They all, are in. There's a wonderful book called In on It, and they're in on it. They're in on your adoption journey. This isn't a taboo subject that they should feel anxious about asking us what's going on, what's happening, anything. I want to be open with people about this as, what we're doing to build a family. And so I made very sure that my family knew what we were doing, and they were very much in on it. My friends were my letters of reference. They were in on it. We really, my closest friends knew about our fertility struggles. So they were so excited to see that we were taking another step to start our family. And they were excited for us, and they were excited that we were taking another step to achieve this dream of parenthood. So we, talking made it wonderful. And I led the conversation so that I was able to explain to them why we were doing it. Did we have comments here and there from people, like, oh, what if they come back in 15 years and want their baby back? Things like that people have, these visions of these terrible things that can happen because they saw a Lifetime movie that this happened or something like that. But it's just not the reality. And so I, would explain and answer. And I personally think there's no bad question. I prefer people ask it rather than make assumptions or go to a bad place, because I want them involved in my child's life and I want them to embrace my child's adoption story. So I try to educate as much as possible.
That's great.
But I did have some, choice comments later, not necessarily from the people that were, the people that I leaned on. I would hope that the people and, that you surround everybody, I think you surround yourself with people who are your support in life for whatever it may be. And I was lucky that I had support from everybody, because those were my people, my family who I love and trust, my friends who I love and trust, and that's who I leaned on. And I would hope that they would give me support, because that's who I chose to be my support.
Yeah, I had a friend, the one who actually inspired me to talk about this subject. I asked her some questions. I'm like, what should I ask? What did you encounter? So some of these things are from her. And she said, just be prepared for people's negative attitudes around adoption, and then try to recognize everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So beyond your family, and of course, family and friends, those are the ones that saw you through the struggle, support you. So I'm assuming my friend was talking about just because she looks different than her kids. And she was saying she's constantly having to justify or just be like, yes, these are my kids. Have you encountered the negative attitude?
Yeah. And, and so that's the after. I thought you were asking about the before, when you told people that you were embarking on the adoption journey. So
this is the after, correct.
So the after, I'd say that when my daughter was young, people would ask me, because people are nosy, and people, just will ask questions. There's things that may look like me and things that don't. So they would ask me specific things, and I would, try to pay it forward as I try to educate and say, well, she's adopted. And, and then the response that I get about 90% of the time is, oh, I'm so sorry. And, and and I know in my brain that people are, oh, I'm so sorry. I should have thought, I wasn't thinking. But it comes across as, I wasn't thinking that there's any other possibility than this is your biological child, is what they're probably thinking. But what it comes across to the recipient of that is, oh, I'm so sorry, you had to adopt. And it comes across very negatively. And I, when my daughter was little, it was, it was easy. It was my thick skin that I had to, deal with those emotions. But her hearing those words, I don't want her to ever feel like, oh, I'm so sorry you were adopted. And, and I understand that nobody is saying that negatively. And I've also said to people, you have nothing to be sorry about, and they're like, no, I didn't mean it that way. Or I'd say, I'm not sorry. This is how I chose to have a child. They're like, no, I didn't mean it that way. And I don't mean to be aggressive with them, but I want them to think about the words that come out of their mouth, and the impact of words are so important in everyday life. But with adoption, especially, words are very powerful. And, and it is important to be thoughtful.
Do you have advice of then how, if someone is considering adoption and they know they're going to have to at some point talk to their child and explain adoption, do you have words of advice of how to lovingly, supportingly explain that? Because I'm guessing it could also be overwhelming to the child to learn this.
Absolutely. And it comes up, for the child to learn this I'm really happy that you said that, because I think, one of the questions that people ask all the time is, when do I tell my child? And my answer is, you tell them from day one. You tell them their story from day one. You don't want this to be a surprise when they're 14 years old or something like that. This is who they are. It's part of their identity. This is how your family was built. There is nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. This is part of the functioning of our family. So we we told our daughter starting on day one when she didn't even know what we were saying. This is, we read her books about adoption at every single developmental level. We, talk lovingly about it. I correct people all the time when, there's, when you say, how do you, the best way to talk about it, I tell people to a lot of times to stay off the internet with certain things because, you don't trust the source. But if you will just, I encourage people to Google proper adoption terminology. And there's so many charts of positive language, negative language. And I encourage people to read it. I encourage my daughter's friends' parents to read it. I encourage everybody I know to read it so that everybody's talking the same talk. So, for example, what everyone's fear is that, a child on the playground or somebody will say, well, if that's your adoptive parent, who's your real parent? Well, real is such a negative word. What do you mean real? What does that mean? A parent is a parent. So it's really, the birth parents are referred to as birth parent or birth mother, birth father, something like that. They're not a real parent, or an adoptive parent is, a parent. A birth parent is not the natural parent. Natural parent is an archaic word. That means that adoptive parents are unnatural. Nobody uses this terminology anymore, but they're words out there. Or the one that I think is the most hurtful that people don't realize until I correct them is, why did she give up her baby for adoption? I mean, that just feels awful.
That's
when
so loaded.
Anybody, it's
so
loaded.
Judgmental.
But people say it all the time. Any TV shows say it all the time. Or why did you put up her baby for adoption? Things like that.
You don't know the backstory, what got to that person. It's probably thousands of tears to get there.
Right. And so what what we say is they made an adoption plan, or they, planned this because it was a thoughtful plan that they placed the baby for adoption. It was a very thoughtful process that happened. And it wasn't something negative, because the negative language hits the child, and you have to think of it from the child's perspective. And every time I correct someone, they're like, "Ew, you're right. That didn't taste good coming out of my mouth. And now that you've said it, I'll never say that again." And it's amazing. I've written so many letters to network TV shows when they use the wrong language. It's just, it's correcting that on a daily basis is a wonderful way of paying it forward.
So first of all, thank you. I didn't even realize this. So this is so informative. So you talked about birth parent as opposed to what they could quote unquote real parent. What other terminology do you hear often in society, or just from people that just don't know better?
I mean, like I said, the giving up for adoption is the big one. And I think and a certain generation says put out for adoption or give out for adoption. They were terms of art that were used. I think those are, or really the real parents, and, why didn't they want you? And why didn't your birth parents want you? Things like that. People don't realize what a hard and thoughtful process that birth parents go through in order to make a decision to place their child for adoption. And it's a plan that they've put in place. Now, they've gone through their own trauma to get there for whatever reason. It was a hard decision to make, and just relaying and giving respect to the process that the birth parent goes through, because these birth mothers are the strongest women out there to be able to, go through a pregnancy and, really put what they believe their child's needs would best be served, even though maybe their heart is telling them some other, possibility. It's just, it's a respectful journey. And I wish if I were to do more public service, which I try to do every day for education, is that I would relay the respect that people should have. And it's not, people come in with their theories, and people love to theorize why children are placed for adoption. And there's no two situations that are ever the same, because it's no two people are ever the same. No two circumstances are ever the same. And everyone's journey is personal. And to just respect that it was a personal decision. This is not gossip worthy or, something that we need to, constantly talk about. It was a hard decision, and that deserves respect.
Yes, absolutely. Can you talk to me a little bit about, and I guess I was thinking about things saying to the child, how do you arm your child with words or support when they may hear some of this negative speak about what you say, why didn't your birth parent want you? Because I can't imagine that's digging into the child's heart, especially if they hear it multiple times.
Yeah. So, I think that part of, this is a big parenting thing, right? So you always, as a parent, no matter how you're a parent and what, how your family was formed, it's about having an open line of communication with your child and having, making sure that they feel comfortable coming to you with the hardest things. And this is for anything. Every parent is going to have this with their child, and keeping an open line of communication and, educating yourself on whatever it may be, for the high school people, whether it's vaping, drugs, friendships, middle school stuff, whatever it may be, you want to always have an open line of communication to know that to your child, it's a safe place to come to. And my daughter did come to me with a few times that things were said to her. A number of times she's come to me over the years, and we have talked it through. If I felt that I had to intervene with parents, I've done that. Have I, done check-ins with my daughter's friends' parents about, has this come up? Yes, I have. We have an open conversation with my daughter's friends' parents, who are my friends too. But I also talked to all of my daughter's teachers. Even when she was in preschool, I actually donated a book to every single preschool classroom that had adoption issues, so that all kids would be reading the same language. And I've given teachers' guides to proper adoption terminology. I've given that, many years to my children's teachers. I've offered to help with anything. And I've asked my daughter's schools and teachers to let me know when assignments may come up that might have implications. So things that people wouldn't necessarily think about, but the Family Tree Project is a very hard project for children that are adopted. The DNA, when you're studying DNA in science, where did your blue eyes come from? That could be, that could be a hard topic. So these are all things that, you engage, you have to think outside and, and put yourself in a position to be a recipient of information, so that if your child doesn't know how to come to you, at least things are coming up so that you can bring it up with them. And I also do check-ins with my daughter. I check in with her to ask her how things are going. Is there anything she wants to talk to me about? And I bring up adoption with her. I think it's important to do that, so that there's nothing, you don't sit around and wait for a child to bring up something to you in life. We do check-ins as parents with everything. How is school? How is everything going with your friends? You check in about everything else. For adoptive parents, this is an additional check-in that we do. When it comes to someone knowing their background, and this may vary depending on closed adoption, open adoption, what the adoptive parents learned about the birth parents, but how much background do you walk away with about, I guess, the genetic background and just the historical background of the birth parent? Yeah, that's a great question. And, as you started the question, it's going to vary incredibly. So sometimes you have a, wealth of information. You have, with these very open adoptions with multiple visits a year, you're going to have ongoing information, back and forth. Sometimes you have very little information. Sometimes the birth parent doesn't have any relationship with her own biological parents and doesn't really know their medical history, doesn't know much of her own medical history. Sometimes the birth father is not even involved in it, maybe there was a situation, a one-night stand or something like that, and we have very little information about the birth father, if anything, and you already don't know, for example, one half of your child's medical history. So it's going to vary at many different levels, and so the best thing, as I tell all my clients to do, and I did this myself, is you involve your there's wonderful pediatricians who do have an adoption practice within their own practice. And these are wonderful resources to run situations by and gather as much information and tell the pediatrician what you have. If there's very specific questions that the pediatrician might want answers to, perhaps you can get that information, but you're at least talking to a medical professional about things, or an OBGYN that you trust might be able to help with these things as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. What are some assumptions you think people make about adoptive parents that it's just not true?
I don't know, because I think I don't know what assumptions people might make about adoptive parents. I really don't know what assumptions they make about adoptive parents. I thought about that question. People ask me that sometimes, and I don't know what assumptions are, because I would hope that only assumptions are good, that they're looking, and supportive. But, sometimes people say, well, maybe this is somebody's way of saying that you shouldn't be a parent or something like that. Those are the very skeptical, mean people, but yeah. I find those are, the outliers.
Yeah. And I actually tried to ask myself this question, like if I was an adoptive parent, or just like what assumptions, because I don't have a ton of interaction. Well, I'm not sure. Again, I have a friend that has adopted 2 kids. And then I also grew up with my cousin being adopted. And I always knew she was adopted. She's, some people say the stupidest things. She's Korean, and she looks Korean because she is. And we were at a bar mitzvah of one of our cousins, and someone just said, how do you know the bar mitzvah boy? And we're like, where are their cousins? And they looked at us like, oh, I see the family similarity. And I'm like, really? I guess it was one of those things where people say where they don't know what else to say. But it's like that was what I was thinking. Like people just, make assumptions that just aren't true, or just, I don't know, maybe it was just something I was thinking.
No. And I think that some people, this goes to, being as open as possible. I think that people have to be comfortable I want my friends and my family coming to me and asking me questions about, any questions that they have, rather than assuming the answer to something. Because, if they have a question about how did I feel about, this movie that came out, but, she probably won't want to, talk about it. People who will make assumptions that I don't know how to broach this, or I don't want anyone ever walking on eggshells with me, things like that. There's no real eggshells to walk on other than the ones that are created. So, I think maybe people sometimes assume the answer to a sensitivity level. And I think that might be something to just, there's no elephant in the room when it comes to friendships. So I, would always hope that people wouldn't make assumptions and would feel comfortable talking about things. And, and I sometimes can say things and, and I don't want to make others uncomfortable, but I also do point out times that, if people are talking about what their experience was, what breastfeeding, and I never went through that, I'd say, well, I have nothing to add to this, or what their hospital stay was like, or how they felt when they were pregnant. I will, rather than just sit quietly, I might just say, well, I don't have anything to add to this. And maybe, I don't want anyone to feel, that they can't talk about things around me, but at the same time, I'm happy to share my story, just like you're sharing your birth story. I can share my story about, my quote unquote, it's not a birth, but the placement of my child with me.
It's a birth of a family. That's what I like to think. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, so as an adoption lawyer, so I'm switching hats again.
Okay.
So from adoptive parent, what are some of the bumps in the process you see that adoptive parents may not be expecting? And what are some of the resolutions to these issues? Because I'm sure there's some bumps. You even mentioned one I hadn't even thought of, that, you think you're going to get the baby and then you're like, no, or the birth parents change their mind.
Yeah. So I think that the bumps that happen are, it's going, again, it constantly is evolving, because again, no circumstances are ever the same. But I tend to think there's always some kind of bump somewhere along the way, whether it is that the, birth parent admitted that she used drugs before she knew she was pregnant, or there is a birth father that comes into the picture, where, whatever the bump may be, there may be some circumstances that, that come up. And the way to really deal with them is that when you're going through the adoption process, is that you do want to have your team with you, whether you're working with an attorney. I've been doing for over 20 years, but you want to work with an attorney in your state who generally, there's an organization, the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys, which is about, I think we're 450 attorneys or something that have to be, it's an invitation-only organization where you have to be invited to become a fellow of. And, you have to demonstrate an expertise in this area. So you want to go with someone who has an expertise, not someone who, this person did my real estate closing, or this person, but, a lot of people go to this person was my friend's divorce attorney. They have, they say that they do some adoptions there. Well, they may do some step parent adoptions, but that doesn't mean that they can navigate an interstate private placement adoption. It's a very different beast. When I tell people all the time, this is your family. This is the most important thing in your world. This is not something to live in a gray area or try to cut corners. You want to have, everything neatly tied up in a bow, and just make sure that you are getting in the best position to receive the best advice. So whether it's, using a trusted attorney, using an agency that comes highly recommended, making sure that you are in compliance with the laws of your state. As I said, that adoption is a creature of state law. So, a good place to start may be to meet with an attorney first to say, what am I allowed to do in my state, or go to these information seminars. Agencies have these information seminars all the time to just get some more information. But ask, and then ask people who maybe know someone who's adopted, or ask for references from the attorney or the agency so that you can talk to people. Ask them how, to ask for people who had successful adoptions with that agency or attorney, or people who maybe had a failed situation, and how did the attorney or the agency handle it? So you just want to know and build your team. And your team, remember, includes your attorney, potentially your agency, the doctor. You want the social worker who's doing your home study should be someone that you trust and that you like, and it may be a social worker from the agency if you're using an agency for that purpose. But you want to feel supported during this process, which is emotional and it can be difficult, and you want to feel supported. You don't want at the front to have any of that create anxiety. You want that to be your safe place. You want to feel supported in that.
Everything is great, especially the advice about seek someone that is really a professional, because you're putting a lot of trust in the lawyer to help you see things that you wouldn't, as someone that's not a lawyer, know to do. So that's really important. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you for one tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new or expectant parents. We're going to take a super quick break. We'll be right back.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, we are back. So you are an adoptive parent. You have worked with many. Either hat, put on whichever hat you want to answer this question.
Okay, so, a tip or a piece of advice that I would give is, parenting is tough. I think we can all agree. All parents can agree that this parenting gig is a tough thing, and that everybody has that something extra in their family that makes it is their added bonus to make it a little bit harder, or whatever it may be, whether, your child has special needs, or the child has, some extra issues that need to be addressed, or your child is adopted, or your child is conceived from donor gametes, or whatever may be, or the parents are divorced, or, the list can go on and on and on. So I would just say that, this parenting thing is tough. We're all in it together. And what you can do best is to educate yourself and just read. There's so many wonderful books about adoption out there for adults, for every single age level, for children, and to educate others in terms of adoption so that you can make their job easier in supporting you, and just pay it forward and really take the onus on helping others help you, and really just do everything you can to make your life easier by having others be active participants in your parenting journey, and lean on people. Don't keep it all inside, but lean on people, and potentially, if you want, join, if it's adoption, join adoption support groups where you can talk to other adoptive parents, involve yourself in a community, and it's a great way to find support. Thank you. And where can people find your work? So I'm here in New York City, and my law firm is Rosen, Steinhagen, Mendel. My website is www.law.rsm, that's R-S as in Sam, M as in Mary.com. So you can find all my information there. Yeah. And I'll make sure we have that on the show notes, because they're very I can't even speak right now. They're very well, this is what happens when I do 2 podcasts back to back. We might actually have people that are thinking about adoption, and they want to have someone that really knows this on their side, because you're, as an adoptive lawyer, I'm sure you're their biggest advocate and cheerleader, especially having gone through this yourself. Absolutely. And I understand it at such a, I do understand the personal journey some people have been on, and not everybody's been on the infertility journey to lead them to adoption. Everybody comes to adoption for, because of different reasons, but it is a big step to take, and it's a wonderful step, and it's an exciting step. And I very much appreciate my clients and allowing me to be a part of their family building journey. Well, thank you for sharing so much knowledge and insight and compassion. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Be well. Take care. Okay. Bye.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Thanks for listening.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.